Okay, Peopleware. I had you read, I know it was a lot, but you know, the density of the content got pretty light in the second half of the book. And it got a bit repetitive, I thought, in spots. Personal opinion. But this is probably the single biggest issue out of the rest of the book, which is development teams. And the challenge you have in encouraging team growth in an organization as opposed to organizations that discourage team growth. I'm trying to think who I was just talking with about this. Someone in real life. And I quoted from DeMarco and Lister saying, you know, most corporations don't set out to kill good teams, they just act that way. And that's true. So the most projects you work on, how many of you have written projects all by yourselves? Okay. How many of you have written projects in teams? What are some of the issues you face on team projects, besides what you're doing right now? What are some of the issues you face on team projects that you don't face when you're writing by yourself?
Difference in like understanding of what the vision of the project is, like what we want to actually do.
Yep.
Like specific things.
Oh yeah, specific things. Yes.
Merge conflicts.
Huh? Merge conflicts. Oh yeah. What else? Yes.
We always put the curly braces on the next line.
Trust me, at Pages, I came up with coding standards. And we had one programmer who would not follow them. And I would go through and reformat all this code, and I think it irritated him. But it's like, these are coding standards, yeah.
People that like writing as few lines as possible in the most obfuscated way.
Oh yes, yes, there is that.
Other ideological differences.
Yes, other ideal, and that could be a real issue.
People break stuff and everybody plays the blame game to try to blame each other for these faults most of the time.
Yeah. At Pages, this course, you realize, is 25 years ago, so our software took over, when we got to a point where we're doing builds, we do daily builds. It would take overnight for everything to compile and so on. And we quickly established a protocol, which is that if anyone checked in a change that broke the build, he or she had to buy donuts for the rest of the engineering team. And so whoever came in first in the morning would go and look at the script and see the output from the build script and see whether or not it compiled successfully. And if it did, that person would start searching and say, okay, who broke this? And whenever that person shows up, it's like, donuts, you owe us donuts. It was actually a very effective tool. Yes?
Balancing how much quality code versus how much time each member puts in. Because some members takes a short amount of time to make a lot of quality code. Some people take a long amount of time. So it's that kind of weird balance.
Yep. Any other thoughts? Yeah?
Varying levels of understanding of technology is being used.
Yep. So these are all very real issues. Now, the point here, the best work groups, the ones where you have the most fun and the most performance, team interactions are everything, and it's hard. I've said any number of times at Pages, our team almost ripped itself apart. And we got past that. But it was a very difficult situation, and it was the first time I had programmed. This was a long, sustained team like that. Most of my programming projects prior to that had been individual efforts, and I had complete control. I knew what I was doing. Didn't have issues with conceptual unity. Didn't have issues with ideology. Didn't have any of those issues, and I could estimate and get stuff done. One of the reasons my estimates at Pages, when I was doing project management and architecture, one of the reasons they were so bad was I assumed everyone thought the way I did. And I simply looked at every task and said, oh, it would take me this long to do this task, and it would take me this long to do this task. And it's like, well, for starters, I think my estimates there were a little optimistic, to say the least. But I was failing to factor in the inherent friction, and I don't mean in terms of personality, I mean in terms of solution mismatch. The inherent friction of the way in which people were working and whether or not the results integrated with each other. Now, key aspects of a gel team: low turnover, strong sense of identity, sense of eliteness, joint ownership of project. I love this when I read this because this is what we ended up creating, the pages. I still have, in our first set, we had 2 sets of offices. We had our first ones, and then after we closed on venture funding, we moved to a much bigger building and so on. At the first set of offices, I have the door sign that says Pages Software Inc., which is outside the main door into our offices. But there was another door down the hallway where you could come in. That one said Bonsai Research Institute. Have you seen Buckaroo Bonsai?
Yeah.
Yeah. We called ourselves Team Bonsai. That was our identity. And everyone said, what the heck is he talking? Go watch it. One of the great cult films of all time. But we called ourselves Team Bonsai. We had that identity. We actually talked about getting white lab coats at one point. We had very low turnover. In the whole 5 years, there's one programmer I mentioned who was one of the first ones I hired, and I fired him after a month just because he wasn't. This was early days. I would give him assignments and say, I need you to think deeply about this particular problem. And come back to me in a month and let me know what you've got, because this is going to take a lot of work. And he'd come back like 2 days later with a sheet of paper and say, this doesn't even begin to scratch what I'm asking. And after I went through that about 3 or 4 times, and then I noticed he was coming in late and leaving early, and skipping Fridays, I finally brought him in and fired him. It was hard, because I had hired him personally, and I knew him before. So you're firing somebody. He wasn't a close friend, but he was someone I knew around the San Diego tech community. That was hard. We had the one other developer that I mentioned who had some personal, emotional issues and became increasingly disruptive within the work environment. I didn't have to fire him, our VP of engineering did, but even with that, we kept him on for like 2 years. Other than that, we had 0 voluntary turnover in 5 years. We had 2 engineers who were laid off when we had our first round of cutbacks due to funding about 4 years in, and then the rest of us, the company closed down after 5 years, yeah.
After you fired one of your members, did you try hiring someone else to come back on? Or would it be too costly, like to bring someone new on?
Oh, the one that I fired was only the 3rd or 4th hire. And we eventually got up to about 10 people, so it was, I don't know if I hired him before or after I hired Bruce Henderson. I'd have to ask Bruce, because he'd probably remember. It maybe had been before, so. He was very early on, and he was gone before most of the other engineers were hired. So these are the things you want to look for in a team. Now, how do corporations kill teams? Any number of ways. They don't trust you. And how many of you have had the experience of working in an organization where it's clear upper management doesn't fully believe or trust the IT group? Anyone else have that experience? 30 words or less is?
I just felt like, so the team I was when I was working my internship got dissolved, and no one got fired, but everyone got reallocated everywhere. And we had one testing framework that team had worked on for a year, and it was very good. But they wanted to use a specific one, so the other one wasn't bad. It was just a lot more juvenile. It was written by an intern.
Oh.
Like the summer before. So it was, there were problems there, but I just felt like maybe they didn't quite have an understanding of which system was going to be better in the long term. But
Someone back here had their hand up. Did you have your hand up? Okay. So distrust and micromanagement. Basically trying to micromanage. Yeah.
The team wanted to, like, let's use these tools, and then like, management was like, I don't know about that.
Oh yeah, and that's, we'll actually talk about that in Accelerate.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm worried about
It's the same formula that we chose because we want to use it.
Yeah. A lot of paperwork and busy work, breaking a team up. And what they talk about specifically is there a situation where upper management will actually feel threatened by a very successful bonded team. And they're like, well, we need to break these folks up, and we're going to divide them up and scatter them among other teams. They'll overtask you. They'll ask you to ship a bad product. There are a few things that feel worse. How many of you have had to ship a bad product? Where you said, this really shouldn't be going out the door? It's not a good feeling. I know companies, and I have friends who are in companies who are dealing with that. And there's the quote, most organizations don't set out to consciously kill teams, they just act that way. Phony motivation, that gets back to my sister's comment, don't they realize they're dealing with adults? You know, offering us bonuses or threatening our salaries if we don't work harder when we're working 60 hours a week for 3.5 years just doesn't make sense. Or pitting team members against each other. Spaghetti dinner, yeah, that was an okay chapter. Chemistry of team formation, this is sort of repetitive. Pride of workmanship, cult of quality, we're going to build the best stuff. Provide closure. Steve Jobs liked to say, real artists ship. And you want to build successes. And part of the problem, you know, as a programmer, especially as a team, you want successes that you can point at. There are a few things worse than either having to ship a wretched product because management is insisting on putting it out there before it's done, or constraining what you can do, continuing to add features and so on and so forth, so you're never able to ship it all. Preserve and protect teams. We're going to see a lot of this re-echoed when we go through Accelerate. For those of you who haven't purchased your copies, this is what the book looks like. I'm sure there are Kindle versions. Fertile soil. I would talk. See, this is why I lumped this all into one lecture, because a lot of this stuff is like, yeah, there's one or two key points. The risk factor. If you're building a note-taking app for iOS or Android, the first question is, what's the point? There are probably 100 out there in Google Play or the App Store. Unless you've got something really novel, something really different, there really isn't much point for it. And the number one reason why startups fail is lack of market opportunity. They start up and they build something and it turns out no one wants it. That can happen. Especially it can happen in the app market because there are millions of apps out there. How do you even get visibility? You can have the world's best app. How do you get visibility? And how do you know someone else hasn't done something that's 95% overlap with what you're doing? Wasting people times, meetings, have a whole thing there, email. I don't think I need to tell you about how bad it is. How many of you have been as an intern or at a job and you just find yourself in meetings that have no point and that are badly run? You've run some? You know, one of the reasons why standard meetings were invented were to try and encourage people to keep them short and to the point. But it is still remarkable how much management looks at this. Crystal, she may mention this. A year or two ago, they were making changes in upper management at her company. And I guess there were some projects that weren't going as fast as they wanted, and the new person in upper management says, okay, we want everyone here for an 8 a.m. meeting each morning. I thought, that's the fastest way to drive all your good developers away. They're like, okay, I'm not putting up with this crap. I'm out of here. And also meetings that go much longer than they should. Meetings that start late. True story, different context. Some 40, let's see, what year was it? 44 years ago, I was a married student here at BYU. I was Elder's Quorum president. We were having word conference, and one of the counselors in the state presidency was J. Reuben Clark III. How many of you know who J. Reuben Clark Jr. is? He was a counselor to President David McKay, the first presidency. This was his son, who was a classics professor here at BYU. Looked an awful lot like pictures I'd seen of his dad and so on. And something of a curmudgeon in all the good senses. So we were going to have this ward council meeting, and the bishop was late to the meeting. And we had to wait for the bishop. So we're all sitting there, including President Clark. We're sitting. The bishop finally comes, and he's about 10 minutes late. He starts the meeting, and he turns the time over to President Clark, who, first words out of his mouth are, you know, he says, I've been serving in the church for a long time, and I've learned two very important rules. He says, first, there is no meeting so unimportant that it cannot start on time. He said, the other is that there's no meeting so important that it cannot end on time. That applies in business as well. I have tried to adhere to that ever since in running meetings, whether they're secular meetings or whether they're church meetings. It's something that far too many managers and even team leaders don't appreciate. Making change. Remember how I've said people hate change? Sometimes the people who hate change are the people in the organization when you're trying to change things for the better. Machiavelli. This is a classic quote from The Prince, and it is true. Remember this quote. There is nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. Because the innovator has for enemies all who have done well under the old conditions, and lukewarm defenders and those who may do well under the new. And if you keep reading at that point, the Prince, Machiavelli goes on to explain part of this because people don't believe in things until they actually have experience of it. So if you're trying to introduce a change, technology, methodology, organizational, meeting schedule within your organization, you're getting a lot of pushback from people who are more comfortable with the old way of doing it. And you're not going to get necessarily a lot of support from people who think it may be a good change. Partly because they don't want to stick their necks out, partly because they're not sure you're going to succeed. I can't tell you how many times I have quoted that in my 40 years of IT development, because it is so true. Organizational learning, making community, again, those were nice chapters, but good to know. Chaos and order. Progress comes from constructive reintroduction of small amounts of disorder. This is so important, and this is what's so hard. Organizations tend to go in two directions. One is they will absolutely stay entrenched with their current practices, technology, methodology, tools, market direction, or whatever, in spite of it not working well. Or they'll try to do wholesale change on a mission-critical basis. It's like we have this new revision of our application that we need to get out in 4 months, and by the way, we're going to change the language, and we're going to change our database on the back end, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this. And we've never used any of those before. I can't tell you in my work as an expert witness how many times I have reviewed a failed project. What I found is like, oh yeah, we're going to re-engineer, we're going to build a new system or re-engineer a system, and we're going to change the programming language, and we're going to adopt this methodology, and we're going to use this new technology, and no one has ever worked with it before. I mean, okay, how many of you are working with a technology for the first time on your group projects, a certain technology, okay? What has that been like? Huh? Exploring the unknown. How many of you have said, yes, it works exactly the way I thought it would? And all I had to do was this, and it did all this work for me. How many of you have found yourselves, desperately Googling, trying to figure out how to make this one little aspect of this particular technology work? Yeah, the hands are going up. Companies do this with mission-critical projects. I think I've told the story at Eric. I went there to help get their Iridium, their portion of the Iridium satellite network management project back on track. But they were starting this new project, doing a network management for a nationwide communications backbone for one of the big telecom companies. They were using this very bizarre, and I say that having worked in many languages, very bizarre and obscure programming language called ASN.1. Has anyone ever heard of ASN.1? Yeah, it's not exactly burning up the world. So this was going to be a major project for a major telecom company. No one at Eric had ever done anything in ASN.1. They had sent a group of about 10 developers to a week-long training conference on it. And they were waiting for IBM to release version 1.0 of their development environment for ASN.1. And that's what they were going to build this mission-critical project in 3 months on. It's a 1.0 development environment. How many of you have ever used a 1.0 development environment from someone? Yeah, what's it like? Does it work? Not well. It's kind of like
some of it works really well.
Oh yeah.
You just run into tons of errors.
Yeah. So and this is where I wrote that. I told you I wrote a memo with 13 risks, and like 6 weeks later, resent it around, and 12 of the 13 risks had come to pass. And several of the risks were centered around this. It's like no one knows this language. They've had 1 week of training. They have never delivered working code in it, and we're on a 1.0 release from IBM, who isn't exactly known for the quality of their tools that they put out. And the project was, in fact, eventually canceled. And look at that. We're done with that. Yes?
So, as a tempering to your only use, the team should only use things that everyone knows. But also leave time available in everyone's working days constantly to explore new technologies.
There are reasons why you want to use new technologies. Thank you, because I talked right past this. You don't do it on mission-critical projects. You do pilot projects. You do test projects. You do war games. You give the developers a chance to try and do stuff where it is not a financial critical issue for the company. And that way you get a sense of, yes, this would work. In other words, stop and think, all of you who are using technologies for the first time, you're basically doing this. You're doing pilot projects, with Unity or Django or whatever you have to be using. You're coming up to speed with it. When you're done with this class, you're going to say, yeah, I used it and I have a better sense of how it works, and here's why I might use it, or here's why I might, burn it in a fire, depending on how the technology works for you. But the point is you do it in a pilot project. You do it experimentally. You do a greenfield project. It's like something new. It's not, we can do this. If it works well, it's fine. If not, this is basically a training experience. Companies don't like to invest in training their engineers, which is one of the most short-sighted and stupid and self-limiting aspects of a lot of corporate management. How many of you have ever found yourselves considering changing jobs or going to a new job specifically so you could use a new technology or language or whatever? Once you get out in the industry, you'll find you do that a lot more. particularly if you find yourself stuck on some old technology. It's like, you know, I'm sort of bridging here. I'm not sure I want to keep developing, you know, in C++ on .NET, so that's actually very profitable. I want to go somewhere else, so you look for a job where you can learn and come up to speed on a new language. So, change is good. You want to, you know, move to new technologies when it's a benefit, but you want to establish that there is a benefit, and you do that by trial projects. Companies are unwilling to invest the time and effort for that because they're so bad at managing projects, period. Yes?
Was chapter 37 the one where they thought everybody would be productive to turn the lights off?
Was that the previous one?
Because like I remember a chapter where they like dimmed the lights,
Oh yeah.
the productivity went up, and then they dipped it more, and they thought that if they turned the lights all the way off, they'd be super productive.
Well, that's the one. Yes, and you have the there's a observation's been made that basically, if you're observing the groups and making changes to try and change productivity, they will almost always improve the productivity. Not because of the changes you're making, but because they know they're being observed. And they feel like attention's being paid to them. It's like they're trying to do this for us. They want to, you know, they gave everyone noise-suppressing headphones. I'm more productive now. And he may well be more productive. Let's go ahead and take a break. I'll do the roll when you come back. So you can't leave. Or if you do, you have to watch the videos just to get that. Let's start again at 5 till. Just be able to get out and get ahead of everyone else.
Or if I did, I forgot.